Clay, could you introduce yourselves to the folks that will be listening to this podcast?
Well, I don't know that they need an introduction to me. I've been around so long that I should be a household word name, but Clay Chastain, most people know me as an activist in Kansas City, going back to the um, 90s when I sort of ventured into the fray, so to speak. I was just trying to save a dilapidated train station that was slated for demolition, Union Station. And I'm an engineer, and I had a design for how to reuse it and so on. Well, unbeknownst to me, I stepped into it, I guess, because they didn't want any interference from people um, suggesting what the those in control should do, and so we did a series of petition drives to raise the public consciousness and get support for saving the building, and those were subsequently trashed by the council. This particular person's name was Michael Hernandez. He just ignored them. And he said, well, bring me one that's legal and all proper, and we'll put the question to the voters on the ballot. So we did that. And the council voted, and this was Mayor Cleaver at the time that was presiding over the council. And Cleaver led the council to um, refuse to put the petition on the ballot, even though it had been certified by the clerk. And that's where the war started. I didn't believe a government could do that, ignore the free speech of people via their petition. And so I thought, well, this isn't right. So I filed a lawsuit. And fortunately for me, we drew Judge Holliger, a brilliant, brave judge, and he ruled that the city had to put it on the ballot, that the people had the right to legislate equally well or bad as do elected officials. Cleaver at first said he was going to honor the ruling, and then of course the establishment got to him, and then they decided to appeal it. So when they appealed it, they ran their bi-state Science City tax plan for Union Station to the voters, and the voters kept mine. The media kept mine buried, and it was tied up in the courts. The voters approved it, and then the court said my plan was moot. The plan that was supported by the voters that signed the petition. So that's where it all began. The fact that I could see that the government was not interested in what the people had to say. They wanted to manipulate and control things for their benefit. They're still doing it. And so it didn't set well with me. And it sort of conjured up, I guess, the rebel in me. So after that, it culminated finally after a couple of failed light rail initiatives. And when they actually did put it on the ballot, the people won the election in 2006. 75,000 people voted for my light rail petition to connect the airport to downtown and modernize the city's transit system. Well, they immediately said that plan was
Clay, let me just stop you right there, because like I said before, I knew the main reason why I wanted to get this conversation on record between me and you, because we've had conversations before, and as I told you, I am a huge admirer of you, and so I want to just like kind of back up just a little bit, because you've said a lot already, and I don't want this to come off like a fire hose, for folks. I really want them, and we might have to do this if it's okay with you a few more times, because I think it's really important. But at the same time, I know how, folks are today, 2024, you went all the way back to 2006. Well, initially you went even back further than that. But let me just let folks know how I got to meet you, or how we got familiar with each other. Is that okay? Because I think it'll help, especially when, because I also want you, to tell a little bit about your history as far as, like where you're from and stuff like that, because I think that those things are important, important as well.
Well, that's fine,
Is
but
that
let
okay?
me just brief.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, let me just briefly finish what I was saying, so that
Yes, sir.
the listeners have a feeling for where I'm coming from, where I came from, why I'm still doing what I'm doing, and
Yes, sir.
challenging establishment. So back to 2006, they overturned this vote of the people. It never happened in the state of Missouri ever, and just ignored their will to build this transit system and said it was unworkable. And then after that came that was under Funkhauser. After that came another challenge, and then they blocked some more petitions, distorted them, and then Lucas blocked the petition in 2019 from going on the ballot and said that it wasn't a good one. And again, it's not his call; it's the voters' call. So that got me into the mayor's race and so on, and brought me up to here. Is why I was running against Lucas, because he blocked the petition. Then he refused to debate when I was running against him this last election. Everything was shut down. The whole election was rigged because there were no debates, no interviews by me from the media, and I was the sole candidate, legitimate candidate on the ballot. Then he had me arrested and prosecuted for trying to go down to City Hall on a council day and ask him why he would debate me before the people.
Mm.
They arrested me, prosecuted me, thought they were going to criminalize me. But it turns out a brave and bright judge said, no, Mr. Chastain didn't do anything wrong.
Mm.
And so now we're in the United States federal court over a 1983 civil rights violation of my free speech by the mayor and the city. So that's where we are right today. So I just want to fast forward the people
Gotcha.
from 95 to 2024 and why I'm still out there and fighting for their, not just the modernized transit, but I'm fighting for the to make sure that we protect the petition process and make it meaningful. And these people have trampled over it. And so I just wanted to get that foundation in there. Okay. Now you can go back and talk about how you first met.
Right. No, that was that was perfect. Thank you. Because the reason why I even started this podcast, Mr. Chastain, is because I, felt just deep down in my soul that a certain type of regime had, just been present and dominant. A mindset has been present and dominant, from just what I could see. And I always consider myself, just a average, not even average, below average guy, from a neighborhood that had, very good, families and people who really respected that neighborhood. And it was almost like an island and an oasis amongst a lot of the different things that Kansas City has been known for that are really negative, like the poverty, poor schools, poor education, segregation, and all those different things. And so, when I got back to Kansas City, after spending time away, from, little time that I was in the Navy and getting a divorce and finally, trying to have a life and grow up a little bit here in Kansas City, I started to explore, what was going on in my area, trying to be, a dutiful citizen myself. I figured that that's what I was supposed to be, right? And so, there were a few times where I came across, some of your ideas that were, when you talked about the transit and the monorail and those different things, or just mass transit in general. And, of course, I never knew that you had or that you were responsible for really leading the charge and saving Union Station. And it blew my mind, once when somebody else, because it wasn't you, I hadn't even met you yet, that told me that you were responsible, for that and the condition that Union Station was in. And here, today, 2024, we look at Union Station and we see all the the beautiful things about it, and yet and still, you have been one of those real people, grassroots folks, who have been trying to, save this city and put forth efforts that will really move the city forward. And so so for everybody who's listening, I just want to share with you the way that I met Clay Chastain. And so I used to live over on or near the zoo, Swell Park Zoo, one of my favorite grocery stores. Still one of the best grocery stores in my opinion, in the city. Is the Price Chopper over on Brookside. And everybody, of course, knows this particular grocery store. If I always having, different folks, hanging out in front of the grocery store, because that area is a huge Democratic area for one, but the turnout in the type of activity that the type of engagement that you get from that area, it's always like prime real estate when you talk about politics in Kansas City. So not even thinking along those lines, I'm just going to the supermarket. I think I was trying to pick up some bacon or something like that, and this gentleman, starts speaking about this mass transit system and the fact that Kansas City has been lacking, compared and relative to other cities as far as transit is concerned. And I think this was about 2019 or somewhere about those parts. And of course, I'm already ran for office before. I had already heard of the of the situation that Kansas City is really suffering from by not having a focus on mass transit and ways to move people around the city that are innovative, as opposed to a streetcar, which is really antiquated and old school technology, because Kansas City has forever had streetcars back in the turn of the century and all these things. And so when I heard this gentleman, speaking passionately about a true mass transit system, I told him, listen, whatever it is that you have, give me the petition. I'm going to sign it, because I've heard of this guy named Clay Chastain, with the same ideas. And, he is a little bit of a maverick, and I think that you introduce yourself as Clay Chastain. Am I right? That was a little bit how it went, right? So this is a genuine relationship, ladies and
sometimes I'm afraid to say who I am.
Right. So this is I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, you are really listening to two individuals from what they call the proverbial different sides of the tracks or whatever, demonstrating that race, age, and all those different things really do not matter when it comes to doing better for your family, for your community, and even yourself. And that's how I met Mr. Chastain. And once we start talking with each other and became more familiar with each other, there's some a lot of different things that we probably can get into. But let me ask you this, Mr. Chastain. Where are you born? Where are you born? Can you tell me that? California. And when did you come to Kansas City?
I graduated from the University of Arkansas with a degree in a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering in 1980. So I got a job at Black & Veatch Engineering and moved to Kansas City. I worked for them control systems, and I also worked for General Motors. So that was my engineering history. And of course, I moved into the inner city and bought an old house and was enamored with Kansas City and the great, beautiful neighborhoods, and it had an old city feel to it, just kind of like finding an old truck in a barn. It was dusty and hadn't run in a while, but all the parts were there as original. and it was just charming, especially the plaza. And so I fell in love with the town, and I just minded my own business for 10 years, basically. I was involved with neighborhood litter cleanups and taking vacant lots and turning them into gardens and, things like that while I was working as an engineer. And then the train station started to come into view that it was, they were talking about tearing it down. I thought, wait a minute, we can't do that. And that's what spurred me to become an activist. But other than that, before that, I was just like anybody else. I minded my own business and was just a quiet citizen, and that sort of was a springboard for me. And I might have left it at just that, but it was just I guess I don't know any other word how to call it or describe it, as a corrupt government that I ran into. People whose interests were not for the people but their own. And I began to see that Kansas City was like a false town. It was run by, I didn't even know it was at the time, but run by wealthy people, liberal Democrats. They wanted to control everything. And they didn't like dissent. They didn't like debate. They didn't like alternative viewpoints or anybody challenging. So they discouraged these things. They discourage petitions. They block them. They still do. They discourage debates. They just try to dominate, and they do things that are in their interest. For instance, look at what's in the news right now about the stadiums for the Royals and the Chiefs. Mm-hmm. I mean, here they're proposing a 40-year, 3.8-cent stadium sales tax. 40 years of the sales tax. That's generally kind of a regressive tax. I've used it though, but it's always been for the public good. But they're trying to impose it upon the poor people who can't even afford to go take their families to a Royals and Chiefs game. But they want to put this tax, these millionaire players, billionaire owners, the chamber, the civic council, they want to put this tax on the back of poor people to satisfy their whims. At the same time, we have a third world, outdated, unpopular, ineffective public transportation system that if we put that money into that would create all kind of benefits things that would directly benefit the everyday citizen. Enable them to get around town and save them money, improve the air quality and the living environment in the city, create jobs, bring more people and businesses to the city, help people get to the distant airport and back, without spending so much money and wasting time in traffic. And, these are all things that will benefit everyone. But no, we're going to put it on the ballot for the wealthy. And so that's what's been wrong with this town for decades, Mr. Duran, is that we have put the rich over the poor, the glitz over infrastructure, corporate greed over the greater good. That's where our priorities have been. And that's why we have a horrific crime rate. We have horrific economic disparity in the city. We have people leaving the inner city for decades, even though we have some growth in the Northland. In the inner city and the central city is being decimated because we've invested in the wrong things. And so, they say, a town's only as good as its leadership, or I think the actual quote was, a town's only as good as its newspaper. And that's the other thing. We have newspapers in the town that don't give people both sides of the thing. You have a liberal Kansas City Star, you have a liberal Kansas City Public Radio, and to some extent, liberal public television. And they give people just one side of things. They didn't even demand the mayor debate me, or ask him why he wouldn't debate me. They canceled debates, mayoral debates, because the mayor wouldn't come, and therefore they canceled the debates. So this is how they manipulated, control the public's opinion. And then on top of that, people have gotten so discouraged that we have apathy, voter apathy. Nobody votes anymore. Well, they like that. So They like that because they just get their small contingency out to vote, and with a low voter turnout, they control the elections.
Right. Now
That's what happened in the mayor's race.
let me ask you this real quick, Clay, because I really agree with you as far as the corrupt nature of the government, and or especially here in Kansas City, really here in Kansas City. I mean, one of the things that is easy to recognize, but is so immediately glossed over, is the legacy of corruption here in Kansas City. I mean, for the most part, I know, coming from where I come from, you know, the like you said before, the amount of disinvestment the disinvestment and neglect that comes, from a corrupt situation. Because, if it's a corrupt situation, I'm sure you would agree that that means that there's really no accountability taking place. And if there's no accountability taking place, then the disinvestment and the deterioration of the quality of life, becomes clear. And so it just really blows my mind that, you speak on a time where, you saw, this city, hemmed up with corruption from liberal control. But yet and still, um, we're still dealing with with that pretty much that same dynamic here in 2024. Well, I know that you agree with that. So, Clay, let me ask you, what would you say is possibly a way to, or considering now, because you brought up the Royals and you brought up the Chiefs and how they're pushing for a 40-year tax. That's a pretty much a regressive thing, a sales tax like that being spread out over everybody, right? Why would, or how could you demonstrate to people that connection and that relationship to the continuous promotion of this ideology, and how it relates to more over a quality of life that continues to deteriorate for a good majority of the folks here in Kansas City? I'm sorry,
Well,
I probably
again,
made that
quality
like
of
way too
life.
complicated of a question.
Well,
Forgive
I
me.
think I got the drift there of the question. Quality of life is, to me, is a function of the livability of a city. How livable is it for its citizens?
Right.
And stadiums don't do anything for the livability of the people.
Wow.
They're mostly
Wow. Well,
geared toward.
say that one more time. Stadiums does very little for the you said the quality of life for the individual. I just don't want anybody to gloss over that, because
Yeah.
you're pointing it out, you're demonstrating, you're putting it right there in front of folks. Because I'm sorry. Let me stop cutting you off.
Well, that in other words, like I said before, when you're putting glitz over infrastructure, glitz is generally um, something that attracts tourists. So we've also put tourists over residents for decades, in that we have, we brag about how many, we bring in so many millions of dollars a year from tourism. Well, I'm not against tourism, and I don't think anybody is. That's a part of your revenue stream, but we're out of balance. Say everything, we invest in new airports, we invest in a convention center, we invest in stadiums, we invest in powered light drinking establishments and entertainment. Well, this does bring in people from outside of town, but what happens is that they leave, though, right? They come and they go, and so we're stuck with a town that has a deficiency of revenue in order to maintain services and infrastructure. And that's what's happened in the city. We have a backlog of $5 billion in deferred maintenance. 5 billion, not 5 million, 5 billion,
Mm.
because of this. See, And so, are you going to move to, for instance, if you're someone that's living in, you're in college, you get out of college somewhere, you think about moving somewhere, is a new Royal Stadium or a rolling roof over Arrowhead going to make you move to that city? But
Uh,
if you
not
look at
not
that
if
city, you
not
say,
if not if I am interested in enrolling the family that I might be looking to start, or if it comes to starting a family, that might not necessarily be a priority over the schools
right,
and the roads that I might have to
exactly.
drive my children to. So yeah, no, that's just a no.
Yeah, and so if you were in college and you're saying, you know what, a lot of young people that way, I really don't want the expense of an automobile. I'm sensitive to the environment and trying to protect it and so on, and I want to simplify my life. But I see this Kansas City, Missouri, is I understand that they've built this modern citywide alternative transportation system where they connected the airport to the downtown and central city with a fast rail system. They've got these greenways where you can bike and walk and scooter and take an electric bus, that are separated from cars, and they connect, neighborhoods are connected together. And I don't have to even own a car if I move to Kansas City. I can save 10, 12,000 a year by just using their alternative transportation system. And I think it's so cool. And that's where I'm going. That's where I want to move to. See, that's the kind of thing that people think of transit as just kind of boring. And it's just, Kansas City's not dense enough and it's not big enough and it's not this and this and that. It doesn't have to be. We're dense enough and we're big enough to build a transit system, and that's going to bring people back, and it's going to increase density. See, and we have again a more livable city because we're not jammed up with automobiles and parking lots and traffic congestion and noise and just people spending too much of their disposable income on transportation. So all of a sudden we have a really major selling point for the city. And we're going to capture young people coming here who want to live in that environment. But we're not going to capture them by building a new Royal Stadium or putting, again, a rolling roof over Arrowhead. That's not going to do it. But yet we're going to go in April to put before the voters, in lieu of spending this money on infrastructure, modernizing our transit system, we're going to try to impose on voters a 3/8 cent sales tax for 40 years. That's almost a half of a century.
Wow.
And if they don't do it, we're going to tell them that we're going to take our playing marbles and go somewhere else.
Wow.
So they hold this over the public. They put them on almost a guilt trip that, you've got to do this or we're going to lose the Royals and Chiefs. And we couldn't do that, could we? And as well as I do, there's numerous studies, economic studies that have been done that show that sports stadiums and everything aren't the economic panacea that they make them out to be. Oftentimes they're a losing proposition for a city with all the extra police they have and traffic control and using that revenue for that instead of something else that would bring more money in. So it's not something that is on par with what I'm talking about as infrastructure investments. And like you said, investing in school, investing in making the city safer. There's a lot of things we could do to to reduce the homicide crisis. That would involve, that would require money. Investments in these poor areas, in their infrastructure, investments in learning centers where they can learn trades and stuff, and
Okay, let me just throw this out here because I definitely want to hear your response to this. And so I just recently picked up the last pitch, right? And the pitch,
the pitch.
The pitch.
Did you have some gloves on? Or some kind of
protection? Nah, didn't have any gloves on, no protection, right? And so, because I like to listen to, and I like to read, different things from different places,
Sure, yeah.
I listen to, the left, I listen to the right. I mostly listen to the left, because that's really
and then you
where.
Stand up, fight, don't you?
Oh yeah, we'll check.
Stand up, sit down, fight.
Well, check this out. So I pick up. So I'm looking at the pitch, right, and it has an article in the pitch, talking about Kansas City's approach to the gun violence, right, and how were copying a program that is based in Omaha. I think it was called the Omaha 360 or something like that. But anyway, well, you got an organization called the Kansas City Common Good that seems to be, spearheading, this initiative. But when you look at the way that the pitch wrote it up, it seems that the pitch would have, I guess would you say, a little bit of a contradicting opinion about what the 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 folks from Kansas City Common Good and the program that they're starting, because of course they put the article in there and they talk about what KC Common Good is doing, but when you look at the illustration that's next to the article, it has two very two political figures trying to grab onto a trophy, and they're standing on a podium behind the yellow tape and the chalk outline of somebody standing on the yellow tape. And so, if you can imagine two political figures, one woman, one male, one woman, one's in a suit, one's in a dress, and they're both holding on to this trophy. And like I said, they're standing behind the police tape and they're standing on a podium as if, as if there was like kind of like the red rope of Hollywood. And so, but yet and still the police tape and the thing that's being, is keeping them away, because, when you're behind the tape or the rope and you're standing on a podium, you're kind of protected, or you're away from all the stuff that's going on, but yet and still you're standing on a podium and you're grabbing a trophy. So you're trying to present this image that, yes, everything is, going great. And so the message, or the underlying message of the article was just are we going to get more platitudes, or are we going to actually see change? And even in the article, it points to a huge difference that, I always come to recognize when other places, because I even heard St. Louis, of all places, has even saw a reduction in their homicide rate. Even Chicago has saw a reduction in their homicide rate. But little old backwater Kansas City, we still continuously have, record homicides, and the faces are still all the same. Because if you, go to KC Common Good's website, and if you look at the board of directors, just like you said, the civic council and all these people, they pretty much sit on all the same boards. They pretty much all have the same backgrounds, and yet and still these are the champions of diversity, equity, inclusion, and all those things. But it just seems to me more of the same. I mean, I don't. Of course, it wasn't a question, but and I know that you've probably seen a whole bunch of that. Could you chime in on or respond to that for me, Clay?
Well, remember, I'm an engineer, trained in engineering design and so on. I'm not a homicide crisis expert or so on, but we are trained to problem solve. So I have a mind. I have the thought process. The thought processes have been developed in my mind to problem solve, and so we know what we're doing is not working. We've had 5 years under Lucas of record homicides. So whatever they're doing, and I'm not saying people's efforts are not sincere, okay, but it's not working. And this isn't just like, well, the streetcar is not working, we're gonna switch it to a more faster rail system. These are lives that are being lost, families that are being torn apart, and so on. So it's imperative that we develop a comprehensive plan that addresses this, and we can measure the results, of course, by it. And we haven't had that. See, they just stumble around, and one thing comes up, another comes up, and we need a plan that is specific, comprehensive, and presented to the voters and say, look, we're going to implement this comprehensive plan. I talked about it, or I alluded to some of the things I would do. Of course, you have to get tougher with the criminals. You can't put them in or let them out again so they hurt somebody again. You just can't do that. But at the same time, you've got to try to give them alternatives to a life of crime, give them more a chance for opportunity, educational opportunities so they could learn a trade, for instance, and make a great living in the trades, which we have a shortage of. They don't need to go to college, but give these people some opportunity and hope. And yet we keep sinking money, like we go back to this glitz and stadiums and everything, instead of putting it into areas of the city that are disadvantaged and to uplift these people. See, we've got to get to the root, obviously the root cause of crime. It's economic disparity. It's lack of values. It's lack of families, lack of fathers. It's lack of job opportunities. It's comprehensive. See, I mean, why we need a comprehensive approach to it. You've got to attack this problem from many different facets, and we don't have a plan to do that. And we have a mayor that's in Washington, D.C., he's talking about guns and everything and blaming the guns on the crime. Well, we need to help the people who are pulling those triggers so they don't pull the trigger. They don't even want a gun. See, that's what we need to focus on, and not just trying to confiscate guns and keep guns out of Kansas City. And, that's like trying to stop booze. We tried that and in the 20s and 30s, and it was a disaster. So we've got to start using common sense and innovative thinking to tackle these problems. But the number one priority has to be making the city safer, above transit, above everything, above stadiums, everything. That should be number one. Because if we're not safe, we aren't free. If we aren't free, we don't have anything. And we're not doing that. We're just sort of like turning our heads the other way and grimacing another homicide and grimace another homicide. And we're working with the federal government to work with local authorities to give the police more this and that, and it's not working.
Right.
See? And if something's not working, you try something else. If a leader's not getting the job done, like Lucas, you try another leader. That's why I ran for mayor. But only 12% of the people turned out to vote. And he won 80 to 20. I had no campaign. I had no coverage. I had no debate. I had nothing. Just my name, basically, because the media shut me down.
Right.
And he shut me down. He shut debate down. He didn't want the people to hear from both sides, him and me, as to who had the better ideas and to hear him defend his record. He didn't want that. So he cared more about his forwarding his political ambitions than he did the public being informed. And yet he's the mayor.
Right.
And
now,
these are inherent problems with the dynamics of the city that hold us back and blunt the free flow of ideas and challenging ideas, like I've tried to do. They try to stop you and bury you and stomp you and distort everything and silence you and that's not working for the city. See, and that's why people don't vote anymore. My view is most people don't vote because they think their vote doesn't matter. The fix is in this city. They're going to do what they want. Right. That's why they don't vote. And that's exactly what they do want. They want to dismay the public, discourage them, so they have more. Then they have total control, see?
Right.
That's what's wrong. When you have a population of a citizenry that only 12% come out to vote for their leader to lead this city, something is rotten in Denmark.
Right. So it would almost seem as if the tyranny, right, is not of the majority. It's coming from a very, very small minority. Now let me throw this out here, Mr. Clay. You've talked, I know, about the corruption, right? And you've also brought up the fact that there is a liberal influence, a leftist liberal influence, and we just got, or they just finished what was what they call the Davos Summit, right? The World Economic Forum. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, right? But I find it very, very strange when you see something that you would believe has no relationship whatsoever to the things that are taking place in your backyard, considering that they're on the other side of the world, up in a mountain with, again, a small group of elite folks, right? But someone
And they flew there on their private jets too, probably.
right, right. But someone at one time pointed out to me that, we have a massive amount of renters in Kansas City as opposed to homeowners. And it just seems that home ownership is never really included in the conversation when we talk about housing and things like that. And yet and still, how is it that somebody like yours? Well, I want to ask, how is it? How do you feel, or what's your, or please share your thoughts about how we could literally be experiencing a situation where Kansas City is so ingrained in a leftist communist regime that if we don't focus on more freedom for the everyday individual, and actually the focus on the nuclear family and even the traditional nuclear family, please, yeah, like I said, share your thoughts, please. I want to hear, and I definitely want folks to hear, because like you said, you're an engineer, how things work, and I really believe that people can benefit from your experience, and really being involved at the forefront in all this, because this whole government corruption, especially coming from this type of ideology, and just didn't spring up out of nowhere. So, if you could just spend a little time on that, I really appreciate it.
Well, you've addressed a lot of things there, and I'll try to see if I can pick up on some of the points you made. But as far as housing and so on, if you'll notice in the city, we've become increasingly more of a people come to City Hall and they want something. They want something. They want subsidies of some kind. They want free this, free that, help with this, help with that, And we have always been a generous country, and our my religion, Christianity, tells me, you help the poor, you help those in need. You don't just think about yourself, you think about your neighbor. But part of that is we can't set up this poverty mentality, I guess you could say, where people are, we're not enabling them to make their own way and own their own house and provide the education and everything that's needed for people to elevate.
Yep, there we go.
Okay, we're back on.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sorry about
Well, just to wrap up what I was talking about is that housing, jobs, all this stuff is tied to education and giving people the means to elevate themselves. And we're not focusing on that enough. As I said, we spent too much money on entertainment and glitz and not investing in people and things that they can use to make more money. And even the transit. See, we build a transit system where these people could save $10,000 a year every single year by using transit, not having to own, operate, and pay insurance for an automobile. That would give them more of a chance to pull themselves out of poverty and be able to afford their rent and not have to have it subsidized and so on. So and I think that's kind of a conservative philosophy, is it not? That you recognize the inherent parts of being human and you work with those. In other words, people like to own their own things. They like to be proud that they did this for themselves and not get a handout. They have ambition. Don't throttle their ambition. That's part of being a human being, is to try to get ahead and to improve yourself, and to use your assets, whatever they may be, to improve your condition. But if we start just taking that away from people and just giving them things continually, it just weakens them, and then that weakens our society, and then we fall into this, like a communist state. That's the you go to Venezuela, North Korea, that's what's happened there. The people have nothing. Everything's been provided. They have no incentives, no education, and they're living in dismal conditions.
Right. Well, man, Mr. Chastain, we just came across that hour mark. Is there anything that else you want to say, or you just want to just leave it there like that? Because you responded excellent. I think that you have definitely and continuously given people, not just food for thought, but a direction that they really can buy into and hold the elected officials accountable to. I think that's one of the main things that we really are missing, and which is one of the reasons why I think it's so important, and why I want to do the best that I can to continue to push your vision and present you the best that I can to folks, and get people to listen to you as well. So with that being said, if you don't have anything else,
I do have one more thing to say.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
And that is I appreciate you and your podcast, because it goes back to what we said earlier in this conversation. If we don't have the ability of the citizenry to hear both sides of things, hear open debates, hear this point versus that point, then we have nothing, right? We have people that are going to control the population for their own self-serving purposes. We have no checks and balances. We have nothing for the public to compare by and to stimulate their mind and to encourage them to go out and vote. Well, I've heard this debate, I don't normally debate, but I heard this debate, and I'm really fired up to go out and vote now. Because I see what's on the line. I understand it more. I'm into this now. It involves me and my community. So we need people like you, since we can't get it through the traditional channels of media, like the Kansas City Star. Everybody knows the Star is not fair. It's biased, and it provides pretty much one viewpoint. And it didn't interview me in the entire mayor's race. Did you know that? They never called me for an interview.
Yeah.
They didn't want to interview me. They didn't want the people to hear my voice.
Right.
They wanted to silence me. The Kansas City Public Radio, KCUR, they flat out said they're not going to interview me or have me on their radio show, even though they had the mayor on there.
Right.
Because they don't like my point of view. They didn't want the public to hear my point of view. And a lot of these places don't want me on because they know I'm going to bring somewhat of a negative message about the conditions of the city under their control. They don't want people to hear them criticized. You see? So what you're doing, Mr. Duran, is invaluable to the community, because you're giving me and others, I presume, a voice that is not being afforded to them by the traditional media outlets that the establishment controls in this city. So thank you for the opportunity to voice my opinion, and keep going.
Yeah, man. And Mr. Chastain, I really, really appreciate that. It is definitely genuine love and admiration that I have for you. This won't be the first time. So please, if you're willing, if you're able, we'll keep this thing going between you and I as much as, your time can afford. I know you got a busy life and everything, and you're always fighting. So I definitely want you to be safe. Again, take care of yourself. and we'll keep this thing going. And I definitely look forward to it, because it's gonna be a treat. It'll be a treat for myself, because I just like, listening to you, period. But I think that, we're in an election, or presidential election cycle, so I think that this thing could definitely afford, some folks a lot of value. So thank you for participating with this with me.
Thank you, sir.
All right, appreciate you.
Good day.
All right.